Welcome back to the channel. We have a problem. We always buy abandoned vehicles and we have amassed a bunch of junk. I hate when people abandon their vehicles and just let them sit for a decade at a time. Unfortunately, I'm becoming that person. Every time I see an abandoned vehicle, I have to have it. The purpose of this channel is to find abandoned vehicles, give them a second chance, and get them back on the road. Today we're going to go through each and every one, give a little backstory, maybe talk about what the future plans are, and some of them you have seen on the channel and some are new, like this new Toyota here we got in last week. So here's a good place to start. First up, we got Roly Poly. I was doing my daily marketplace scroll, and up in northern Idaho in this super small town bordering Canada, I found this one. I'm always on the lookout for these holy grail Toyota pickups, and this one's a holy grail, but it is in rough shape. These are the same trucks that are in the Back to the Future movies.
Check out that 4x4. That is hot.
So long story short, my brother and I hopped on a plane, flew out to Spokane, Washington, drove another hour and a half to this small town called Segal, picked it up, and the original plan was to cut across to Wyoming, where I have a Bronco with only 15 miles on it, and then drive the Toyota back and pull the Bronco back with a rental. Unfortunately, there was a huge snowstorm, we couldn't get to Wyoming, and we also had to return the rental truck. In an attempt to avoid the snowstorm, we just rocketed south as fast as we could. It's cold. A little bit. The total trip was about 1,600 miles. We hit a bunch of different states, got a bunch of cool scenery. The one downside was it was so cold. This whole truck is awful. It was rolled by the previous owner and then sat for who knows how long. It's really only good at one thing, and that's cruising at 54 miles an hour and going very straight. The second you go faster or slower, it does not run well. If you turn to the left, it grinds. Something's wrong with the front suspension or the steering. And if you turn right, it's even worse. It has 529 gears in it, so anything over 55 is just gonna rev higher than Charlie Sheen on Tiger Blood. I'm not really sure what we're gonna do with this one. The body's all mangled, the interior's torn apart, it runs pretty rough. So I'm gonna have to sit on this one and think about it. I don't know what direction we're gonna take. Next up, we got Marty. This is pretty much the same story as the last truck. It's another holy grail I found on Marketplace, bought it sight unseen. The only difference was this one was in California. So I bought it and then I flew out to the Bay Area in California and drove it back. I recently posted a video on this truck, so I won't get too into the details with this one. The only difference is I figured out what I want to do with this one. I think I'm going to leave all the modifications alone and just do kind of a light restoration. It has a bedliner paint job that I absolutely hate, so that definitely has to come off. Probably fix the body damage, give it a paint job, and just clean it up a bit. It had been sitting for many years and it ran rough when I got it. The second I got it, it wouldn't go over 45. The valves had no clearance, so I had to clearance the valves right, just give it a tune-up and give it a little TLC to make the 800 miles home. Up next, we have McFly. Out of all the projects, I'm probably the most excited about this one. I found this holy grail online as well, bought it sight unseen. My brother was working in the area. I think it was Colorado or somewhere around there. He picked it up for me and towed it back home. Unfortunately, it's just been sitting ever since it got here. I've actually stolen a bunch of parts off of it. I've taken the radiator, the fan. I even stole the transmission and the transfer case to put in another project that you guys saw on the channel, the rat truck. And, you know, that allowed me to finish that project. future goals for this one is to just do a complete restoration, make it a Back to the Future replica, and I think it'll be a pretty fun one. Up next is Old Rusty. So I kind of bought this Land Cruiser on accident. My friend's uncle was selling a Toyota pickup, and they knew I liked these Toyotas, so they told me about it, and I went to check it out. The Toyota I was looking at had a seized motor, and it was in pretty rough shape. But what I didn't know is that if I bought the Toyota, it came with this Land Cruiser, so it was kind of 2 for 1. Since then, I restored the Toyota, and eventually it'll be this Land Cruiser's turn. After I bought the Land Cruiser, it would only drive for about probably 3 miles, and then the transmission would start slipping. When I got it home, I just changed the transmission filter, and then it ran great. But just like the rest of this junk out here, it got parked, and it's just waiting to get restored. My goals for this one are to restore it, maybe make it a little more capable off-road, give it a lift kit. I might even go for like a overlanding type style, but I think this one will be a fun one as well. Next up, we got Conquestador. This one here is a 1987 Chrysler Conquest, also known as a Mitsubishi Starion, and I have wanted one forever. 2 years ago on Christmas Eve, I saw it was posted locally, and I immediately went up and picked it up. The story behind this one is it's been sitting since 2004. I guess there's some issue with the timing chain or something with the motor, and the guy had kids. He never got around to fixing it. So I picked it up, and eventually it'll be a drift car. I'm not sure what route to go with it yet. I don't know if I'm going to keep this motor, maybe swap it with something else. I haven't really wrapped my head around this one. Next up is my Honda Insight. Out of all these cars, I've had this one the longest, and I hated this car when I first saw it. But my friend had one, and these things get like 70, 80 miles to the gallon. Way back in the day, we did real estate, and this was a perfect car for that job. He had one first, and he was trying to get me to buy one, and I really didn't like it. But we found one for pretty cheap on Craigslist, and all it needed was a key. So ever since then, I've probably put 150,000 miles on it. Been across the country multiple times, driven it from the west coast to the east coast and back. I don't really have a use for it anymore, so I think I'm gonna fix it up and give it to my little sister. There's really not much to it. It's basically just a stock 2000 Honda Insight, 5-speed. It's just a really good commuter, and it's pretty fun to drive. Next up, we got my Honda Shit Site. My same friend that talked me into buying the Honda Insight, this used to be his. The battery pack eventually went out, and a couple other things went wrong with it. And he had no place to store it, so the junkyard was gonna come give him $70 for it. So I outbid the junkyard, gave him $100, and then I bought it from him. I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do with it. I don't know if I'm gonna use it for parts, fix it up, do something crazy with it. It's kind of just sitting here in the meantime. Next up, we got Mopey. This is my 1967 Dodge Coronet 440. A buddy of mine sold a Blazer, like a 1980 something Blazer, and he was going up to Oregon to deliver it. And it's a sin to bring an empty trailer back, so I hopped on Marketplace and everything, tried looking for a Dodge Charger, but the cheapest Charger I found was like 28 grand, and that was about 27 grand over budget. So I found this Coronet and negotiated with the guy, picked it up, and we trailered it back. It ran when I got it, but one of the lobes on the camshaft was ground flat, and it burned a bunch of oil and ran pretty bad. When I got home, I tore apart the motor, had it all in pieces, took it to a machine shop to get it honed. But then I started on a separate project, and this kind of just got pushed to the side. My future goals are definitely to put a 440 in it and restore it, make it pretty presentable. But as of right now, it's waiting. It's waiting in line.
It's restored!
Next up is our Ford Bronco. This is just a stock Bronco, nothing too exciting about it. It definitely needs some TLC though. It doesn't run good, it looks bad. We'll probably do a slight lift on it, paint it, go over the interior, just make it a little more presentable and get it back on the road. Next up, we got Buck 50. My brother and I went to a junkyard that only has cars from like 50s and older. We were looking for parts for this 35 Chevy we're building right now. In the middle of the junkyard, just super out of place, was sitting this 1985 Toyota pickup. I noticed it had AC, so I kind of wanted it just for parts. I talked with the lady that owned the junkyard, and she said that if I gave her 150 bucks to get it out of there that day. So my brother and I went, grabbed a trailer, and towed it home. And I have a crazy idea with this thing. I'm not going to spoil it yet, but I have never seen it done before, and I'm going to give it a go. Up next, we got Duramax. This is my brother's Duramax. It's a 2020, has a lift kit on it, a couple performance parts, some bank stuff. And this is basically just a shop truck whenever we have to go pick up something that doesn't run or have to trailer something. This is the go-to move. Next up, we got the CanAm. This is my brother-in-law's CanAm that he recently got, and we have rolled it twice.
Sabemos cómo voltearlo.
No mames, David. ¿Cómo te sientes?
Ya hasta lo correcté y todavía no dio.
Guacha el espejo que acabas de comprar.
No, mismo te falta. Bueno, ayuda.
Guacha ya se arregló. After they rolled it, we still took it to the dunes, and it still rock crawls, still runs great for now.
Derecho.
I haven't released a video yet, but we recently took it on a huge long dune trip. In Mexico, there was an abandoned plane that crashed a long time ago. And every year, people drive out and camp at this abandoned airplane. I'll be posting that video soon. Next up, we got Chucky. My brother has always wanted one of these Mustangs, these Fox bodies. So he found this one on Craigslist. It was a 20th anniversary. We went and picked it up. It ran great. I mean, it ran okay-ish. When we got home, we took it, ripped it around the desert. And that night, we got bored. So we pulled the motor, pulled the transmission, and just continued to gut it down to the shell. On the shelves in the garage, he just has boxes and boxes and boxes of parts to make this thing a drift car. I think his plans right now are to finish it by the end of the year. Once we get the current project we're working on done, he's just gonna go full throttle on this thing. Next up, we got Opal. My buddy bought this Opal GT a couple years ago, and within the first week, the motor blew and seized up. So after it blew up, he did what any reasonable car guy would do and pull it and try and stuff a 2.3 liter turbo Mustang engine in it. He snagged one of those Mustangs that people love to crash into crowds off of Copart. It was totaled, so he pulled the drivetrain, and now he's trying to science it out to make it fit in this tiny, like 1,400 pound car. He's been busy lately, but when he gets back out here, I'm sure he'll finish it up. And last but not least, we got Woody. This is the project that is holding everything up. It has been taking my brother and I so long to get any progress on this thing with our jobs and just finding parts, making parts. We basically had to tear it down to a shell and a frame and just start building from there. It had been sitting in a garage for probably 40 years. Our old boss bought a house and it was in the garage. He then proceeded to take it to a really shady shop that said they would restore it, had it for a year, and just made it much worse. I got a couple videos on this one on YouTube if you guys want to check it out. But in the meantime, it's a lot of work. We're hoping to finish it in the next couple months to start on some new projects. My brother wants to start his Mustang. I'm not sure what I'm going to start next. But stay tuned for the evolution of this half wooden car. If you guys have any questions regarding one of these vehicles, or maybe you have a preference of which one we start with, let me know in the comments, subscribe, and stay tuned for some restorations.